In the early 1930s, America was a study in contrasts. Monumental advances in transportation, architecture, and communication were reshaping the country, even while desperate economic conditions were crippling America's communities. On the heels of the stock market crash of October 1929, the nation had plunged into the worst economic crisis in its history, and the decade-long recovery reflected staggering 25% unemployment rates and dramatically increased homelessness. Alabamians suffered through the Depression, actually posting higher unemployment rates than any other southern state. Hope was waning and the statewide situation was grim. As a result of Alabama's 1901 Constitution, which firmly cemented power with the state legislature, local government officials were unable to resolve hometown issues simply or quickly.
The needs of local officials are really not provided for because of the process itself. The process is not conducive for local acts to sail through the process. That process does not work up there. And the other thing about it is that I think that local officials are better suited to determine the local needs.
Local leaders needed some way to regain even a portion of the power, influence, and authority their cities and towns lost with the ratification of the 1901 Constitution. And the immense pressure of the Depression created a climate ripe for municipal leaders to band together in that effort. In 1935, with the advice and help of Governor Bibb Graves, who was sympathetic to the plight of cities and towns, the newly formed Alabama League of Municipalities gained a toehold in the rugged terrain of Alabama politics, as well as an executive director whose magnetism would define the organization for decades. And so, with a modest grant from the predecessor to the National League of Cities, known as the American Municipal League, Ed Reed, a charismatic, energetic young man with a background in journalism and government, became the Alabama League's first executive director, a position he would hold for the next 30 years.
Ed Reed was quite a promoter. He was very active. It was a one-man show. He didn't have anybody to help him much. He traveled all over the state.
Described as a ball of fire and a go-getter when he was recommended to the 24 members of the newly formed organization, Reed was quickly defined by his unbridled energy, dynamic personality, and political savvy. He aggressively and single-mindedly pursued the interest of the League, garnering respect at both the state and national levels.
We got along real good. He was a unique person too, and but we had a good working relationship. He was a spiffy dresser, and I'm just like him. We don't like no dead colors.
As a former newspaper editor, Reed's gift for communication and promotion aided him as he began publishing the organization's goals, findings, and accomplishments in the Alabama Municipal News. Starting with the inaugural issue in 1937, his purpose was to provide accurate information, informed opinions, and pragmatic advice for running towns and cities, the principle that still guides the League's official monthly publication, the Alabama Municipal Journal. Within 15 years of its inception, the Alabama League would rate in the top 5 in the nation, and Reed was cited by the American Municipal Association as one of the 5 best possible sources of information on local government. In 1946, after moving office locations several times within downtown Montgomery, Reed signed a lease on a small 7-room shotgun-style building a few blocks from the Capitol at 24 South Hull Street. Through the late 1940s and early 1950s, under the leadership of Ed Reed, the Alabama League of Municipalities focused on helping its membership create more stable, solvent, and seamless operations while influencing key legislation. Just as importantly, the League facilitated quick, reliable communication and interaction between municipal officials and state and federal lawmakers. Until his untimely death from cancer in July 1965, Ed Reed's early fame as a go-getter never diminished. He had attended every legislative session from 1935 to 1965 and was voted most effective lobbyist in the legislature 5 times. During his 30-year tenure, Ed Reed, the trailblazer from Evergreen, earned a nationwide reputation for his expertise in local government issues, and more importantly, he showed municipal leaders that they mattered. When John Watkins assumed the duties of executive director following the death of Ed Reed in 1965, he was well prepared. For almost 10 years, he had been an integral part of the Alabama League of Municipalities while serving as league counsel and staff attorney. He had learned firsthand about the growing and changing needs of the towns and the cities the league represented. The administrative and leadership skills he gained working with Reed, in addition to his previous experience as Prattville's city manager and as a municipal judge, served him well. Watkins' quiet demeanor and soft-spoken gentility would steer the league successfully through times of progress, upheaval, and alteration.
John Watkins was a go-getter. He was a hard-working fellow. He had the feeling of the importance of the league to municipalities. He realized that the cities and towns, small towns like Berry, like Fayette, it didn't have the money to go out and pay for good advice.
To be able to do that and to be able to handle the responsibilities that come with a job working for the league, you have to know how to deal with people, and you have to really have a good general consensus of everything that's going on. And John Watkins was the type of leader that was not a forceful leader. His number one thing was, if you always do what's right for the membership and the league, the rest will take care of itself. Don't ever worry about anybody criticizing you for doing what's best for the organization. And I think that epitomizes John Watkins.
In September of 1968, Watkins purchased lots 37 and 38 in downtown Montgomery on the corner of Adams Avenue and Bainbridge Street, within shouting distance of the Alabama Capitol building. For $60,000, the league had made the first step toward creating a facility equal to the demands of an increasingly urbanized state.
We got some more staff, and it just worked out great, and it was like being in a mansion coming off of 24 South Hub.
While overseeing the construction and opening of the league's new headquarters, Watkins was also shepherding important legislation affecting municipal growth through the Alabama House and Senate.
We have about 4 state-shared revenues that come to our municipalities, but they're meager compared to what other states provide their cities and towns. Alabama's probably one of the leaders in the nation of being able to finance their own operations, that is, with local revenues. We've come to be quite dependent on federal assistance, and if the federal assistance is reduced, some changes are going to have to be made, because we're right on the edge of red and black.
With the introduction of the Municipal Workers' Compensation Fund in 1976, John Watkins and his team found another way to fortify Alabama's cities and towns.
We already have a workman's compensation pool that we've had for 7 or 8 years. It's working real well for the municipalities, saved the municipalities of the state a tremendous amount of money. The legislature passed a law that required cities to have workers' compensation coverage. A number of our cities weren't sure what they were going to do. He knew that the Texas League had set up a pool operation for their cities for workers' comp purposes, and he had different people come in, work together, and we created the Municipal Workers' Compensation Fund, which I'm happy to say over the years has saved cities millions of dollars in premiums. It's been hopefully provided excellent coverage. It's protected their interest and been a very sound organization for them. It served good purposes in providing insurance for those cities, but the other thing it did, it served to be a revenue producer for the league, to provide additional revenues for the operation of the league, for service fees for us managing the Workers' Compensation Fund. And as a result, the league's been able to add many, many more programs and services because we had a funding source to provide funding.
As the 1970s came to a close, the league continued to crusade for municipalities' financial security and self-determining capabilities.
The thing John should get credit for is when we were getting a lot of the oil and gas revenues from the royalties from the wells and the leasing rights of those offshore drilling operations. The governor decided to pass a constitutional amendment, which the people ratified, that actually put that money in a trust fund that they couldn't touch. The legislature couldn't go get at it and so forth. We went to work. This was toward the end of John's tenure as league director, probably about 85, 86, somewhere along there. We went to work with the legislature, and the county's doing the same thing to try to get a law that would provide that a certain portion of the interest derived from the investments of that money would go to cities and towns. We had a lot of negotiations, a lot of work. We finally came up with saying that if any year 60%, in any year, if the interest on the money generated $60 million, the cities would get 10% and the counties get 10%. We were successful in getting that passed by the legislature, and it was provided that cities, each city got a portion, a base portion, and then the rest was divided on population, so everybody gets some. But we made it unique in the fact that we decided that for the city's share, that it had to be used for capital purposes. That way, if it later came where that money wasn't coming in, the cities weren't in a hole trying to make it up in their budgets.
On that victorious note, John Watkins retired from the Alabama League of Municipalities in May 1986 after 30 years of service. During his tenure as executive director, he had written what became standard reference books for Alabama's municipal officials. He also served 2 terms on the board of directors of the National League of Cities.
Municipalities serve the people.
Right.
The municipality, I would like to think, most people offhand think of a municipality as being a separate entity, a separate corporation, which it is. But a municipality is the people in the community, and it belongs to the people. And any additional cost for the services rendered by the municipality have to be borne by the people. Otherwise, you don't get the service. There's no way to provide it.
He was an excellent leader. He always defended the league, and that was the last thing on his mind as the league after he retired. We'd have conversations about every week or 2 weeks. He'd call me up on the phone. He would come by the league. We'd go to lunch every so often, and it was all finding out what's doing, can I help anyway, you know, is that. The league, he was totally proud of this organization and what it stood for, and hopefully we've continued that tradition.